Hi guys, welcome back. This is Rabith, and congratulations, you made it on course 4, and so did I. So I read over all my course readings and I finished that. Now I'm just preparing for my exam, and I was just going over my notes and I was like, you know what, let me review it with you guys so it's better for everybody. So let's get started. Most of the stuff in course 4 is repetitive. You should know some of the stuff already. If you don't, I suggest you should revise some of the stuff you don't know. But yeah, let's go over it. I'm not gonna go over every single lesson. I'm just gonna go through the module summary and see what we can find from there. If I do need to go into details, I will make another video of the things I've missed or things we need to focus on more. Okay. So module 1 summary, basically they just talk about the introducing commercial real estate to you guys and the impact of REBA and Commercial Tenancies Act when trading in real estate, commercial real estate. So while REBA does not distinguish between residential and commercial activity, certain aspects of REBA deserve special mention in the context of commercial real estate. So discovery and disclosure of material facts. The search for such facts can be more extensive and time consuming than the residential due to complexities associated with the property and the transaction process. Providing conscious and competent service, it requires more extensive due diligence, such as referring your clients and customers to third-party experts and having special clauses inserted to the schedule. Keep record keeping. The paperwork that goes into a successful commercial transaction is often greater and includes numerous supporting documents. And recommending services from third-party experts, working with registered and unregistered assistants in commercial real estate. Commercial tenancies are governed by Commercial Tenancies Act. They are more complex than residential tenancies for a number of reasons. For example, leases require specialized clauses. Terms of the lease are up to the landlord and tenant to negotiate. Rights and obligations of both parties are outlined in detail in the commercial lease. If there is a dispute, an individual has two options. They either go to the small claims court or the superior court of justice. And the impact of Planning Act and zoning bylaws. The Building Code Act is a provincial legislation that sets out minimum standards for buildings design, as well as provisions regarding safety in buildings, fire protection, and structural sufficiency. It is updated every 5 years. The construction, renovation, and demolition of buildings require a building permit as per the Ontario Building Code. Steps in obtaining a building permit is application, review, permit, and inspection. The Planning Act. The Planning Act provides a statutory framework for orderly land development in the province. It is administered by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, which also broadly directs overall planning in the province by the way of provincial policy statements. All planning bodies within the province must be consistent with such statements when applying planning policies. Zoning bylaws are enacted by municipalities and set out permitted uses, building structure standards, example minimum setbacks and coverage, and other necessary regulation. Bylaw may restrict or prohibit the use of land, regulate the type of construction, affect day-to-day real estate marketplace activities, and some flexibility is permitted within the zoning bylaws. Owners may seek minor variances when property does not specifically meet requirements. Owners may fall under non-conforming use status. And the benefit and challenges of investing in commercial real estate. Some commercial properties you may encounter include office, retail, industrial, multi-residential, farm, recreational, institutional, hospitality, and vacant land. Some of the ownership options you may encounter include sole proprietorship, partnership, limited partnership. So a limited partnership is an investment arrangement that limits a partner's ability to limits the partner's ability to the amount invested, while also limiting the profit they can make. A corporation, trust, and joint ventures. Each ownership options comes with its own benefits and limitations. Some of the benefits and opportunities may include typically a higher return than other investments, ability to purchase various types of properties to reduce exposure and risk, ability to purchase under different ownership options which provide for such tax benefits. Physical assets rather than stocks, bonds, resulting in lower chance of becoming valueless, high degree of personal control, capital growth, potential to recover capital through refinancing. Some of the challenges and risks may include outgoing costs of maintenance and management of the property, lack of liquidity, higher risk as owner is the last in priority to be paid, requires a large capital investment compared to other investment opportunities, and changes in government regulation. Third-party professionals, you should always, some of the third parties you will want to have in your network include accountants, environmental engineers, structural engineers, electrical engineers, industrial engineers, so basically all types of engineers, and planning consultants and property managers, especially lawyers and mortgage. Oh yeah, commercial and commercial mortgage lenders. You want those guys on your side. So basically, an introduction to commercial financing is basically salesperson should seek advice, seek more information from lending institutions regarding local practices and procedures. A buyer should be advised that the development of a business plan, including cash flow analysis, which would indicate the ability to service debt, is critical component to any commercial mortgage application. The value of the property in terms of cash flow is more important than the buyer's ability to pay, as is the case in residential mortgage financing. It is highly recommended that mortgage brokers be used in securing financing, given unique business needs, complexities in assembling qualifying documentation, and expertise in finding appropriate sourcing and competitive quotation. While applying for a mortgage, commercial applicants must put together a mortgage document package. The range of materials varies and varies by the property type, project scope, and lender requirements. Some of the loans include bridge loan, development loan, gap loan, in-term financing, line of credit, standby loan, wraparound mortgage, blanket mortgage, and participation financing. So I think we should go over all these types of loans and see what they actually mean. We'll do that in the next video, I guess. The impact of taxation on commercial property ownership. So basically, adjusted cost base. The adjusted cost base represents the acquisition price of a property with adjustments as prescribed by the Act. Soft costs. The Act does not define the term soft costs, but it is understood to include, but not limited to, construction-related inspection fees, utility hookup charges, engineering fees, municipal fees, and legal fees, and also mortgage fees. Tax complexities. HST. With large commercial property transaction, the payment of HST at closing would impose a heavy cash flow burden if remitted by the buyer to the seller at closing. Non-resident sellers. Transactions involving non-resident sellers can pose challenges. Legislative restrictions impact the acquisition and disposition of land by individuals or other entities defined as non-residents, pursuant to provincial and federal statutes. Mixed-use properties, generally a property that contains both residential and commercial, which is taxable, views as distinct in entities for HST purposes. In other words, no HST is payable nor input credits available for the exempted use, but taxes applied along with input tax credits for the taxable commercial portion. That was Module 1. Let's move on to Module 2. Let's exit Module 1. Moving on to Module 2. Module 2 is just welcome to understanding commercial construction. Sorry, it just takes a long time to get to a different module. Okay, so construction practices and methodologies. I think I'm saying it correct. But anyways, moving on. Commercial construction methods can be unique to the type of building use, such as retail, office, and industrial space. Third-party professionals play a major role in construction. There are many regulatory bodies and considerations that impact commercial construction. This includes the following: the building code, the Ontario Building Code, minimum distance requirement, Ministry of Transportation, conservation authorities, and zoning and accessibility requirements under the AODA. Before a commercial property is constructed, it is important to ensure that the zoning regulations are adhered to. There are 3 phases to an environmental site assessment. So ESA, environmental site assessment, is done to ensure that the property does not have any environmental contamination, or to determine the level and types of contamination existing at the time of the assessment. Building warranty is an important purchase consideration for a new building construction project. Having building enrolled in LEED certified program is an important consideration, as it will increase the property's value. Office building types and zoning restriction. So office structures are grouped into one of 4 classifications. There's a Class A+, Class A, Class B, and Class C. I guess we will go over those in another video. Another option for an office structure is office condominiums. Common zoning restrictions for office structures include the gross floor area of the building, the height of structure, the maximum lot coverage, the building size and shape, and parking and daylight. Small and large office buildings, construction and design. Key consideration for small office buildings include the significance of floor height, the number of floors, the type of exterior finishes, curtain walls, the use of wood frames, and brick veneer. Key considerations for large building office buildings include the type of building course, the floor plan, significance of floor height, number of floors, exterior finishes, curtain walls in the large office buildings. Retail building types and zoning restrictions. There are different types of retail structures. These structures include big box stores, power centers, shopping centers, lifestyle centers, outlet malls, shopping malls, and main street retail. Key consideration regarding zoning restrictions for retail properties include minimum landscaped buffers, separation from residential use, green belt, signage, lot setbacks, and access and egress from streets and roads. Minimum distance separation regarding some retail use. Industrial building types and zoning restrictions. There are 3 types of industrial structures: general purpose, special purpose, and single purpose. Zoning restrictions associated with industrial properties are in place to control noise, nuisance odors, and waste storage, to name a few. There are different considerations and restrictions for heavy use versus general use industrial space. Retail building construction and design. Structural design and considerations associated with retail buildings include masonry walls, tilt-up panels, insulated concrete forms, wood framing, steel structures, modular structures, synergy. Again, you would have to know what these are. I would probably go over them in another video. So that was module 2. Moving on to module 3. Oh, sorry, we still have module 2 left. Industrial building construction and design. So some designs and construction consideration for industrial structures include pre-engineered steel buildings, exterior finishes, bay depth, width, and height, loading docks, clear span and clear height, roof systems, HVAC systems, floor loads, sprinkler system, mezzanine, finished office areas, utility supplies, truck courts and turning radius, truck aprons, cranes. Mixed use development. Mixed use developments are structures that contain 3 or more revenue generating uses. These can include retail, office, hotel, and residential. Commercial parking. Parking requirements are determined by the municipality's zoning bylaw. Typical requirements include the number of required parking spaces, required accessible parking spaces, loading space regulation, parking space dimension, and ramps. Municipalities will often create a parking bylaw that addresses requirements across a spectrum of property types. Parking options for commercial properties include structured parking, gated parking, parking garages. Multi-residential buildings, construction and design. So things you need to consider are zoning requirements, construction materials, and construction techniques. The building, construction, and design for farm properties. Considerations regarding farm properties, zoning for permitted agriculture use, minimum distance separation description, distinctions as they relate to farm structures, buildings for livestock, equipment, and silos for the storage of agriculture products, and housing for family and workers. Legislators associated with construction of farm properties include the Building Code and the National Farm Building Code. And then we have the last thing in Module 2 for Course 4, Commercial Building Trends and Innovations. Trends and innovations associated with commercial structures include knowing the latest technology and innovation ways to conserve energy. Basically, this is Module 2. Moving on to Module 3. Sorry, it does take a long time to get to a different module. Let's exit Module 2. Yes. Module 3. Let's do that. I think I'm thinking of adding like elevator music while we move from one module to another. Or I should start singing or something, I don't know. Alright, I'm here. Module 3 summary. Oh, it's a small lesson. So in Module 3, basically they talk about key market considerations for office and retail properties. Market condition, among other key market considerations for office and retail properties, will have a significant impact for both sellers and buyers in commercial market. This will influence factors including both the availability and desirability of suitable office and retail properties that will reflect the needs of your sellers and buyers. Introduction to office and retail sellers. Understanding the requirements of the seller allows you as a salesperson to understand the important factors when working towards the sale of both office and retail properties. This will include several different records and disclosures that are necessary for you to understand in order to perform due diligence throughout the process of sales transaction. Introduction to office and retail buyers. It is essential to understand your buyers' requirements when selecting appropriate office and or retail properties that will align within their needs and preferences. These may be generalized needs, such as the case when determining the needs, risk, and anticipated return for a property on or site, and building specific factors that may influence the selection of a purchase. Selection or purchase of an office or retail property. Module 3 was whatever. Moving on to Module 4. Okay, Module 4, Course 4. Due diligence obligations of a salesperson. I think we've already covered this. This has been covered in all courses. As a salesperson, it is your responsibility to gather all relevant documents relating to property and confirming the accuracy of the information. In the absence of documents, you should recommend the seller engage the services of a third-party provider, a third-party service provider. In commercial real estate, often the seller or the buyer may be a corporation. You should know the types of ownerships and be able to verify the identity of the properties. Conducting visual inspection. You will make a visual assessment of the property to consider its appeal and desirability. Yeah, I think we should already know this. To be honest, I'm gonna skip module 4. Let's moving on to module 5. I am sorry for the elevator music. We are resuming shortly. Okay. All right. Module 5. This has good information. Let's do it. Condominium governance. The developer is responsible for registering the declaration and description used to create the condominium corporation, but is not typically involved in the condominium governance past the turnover meeting to the elected board of directors, who are responsible for overseeing the operations and welfare of the condominium corporation. The Condominium Act is the law that establishes how condominiums are created and operated in the province of Ontario, and supersedes rules and bylaws. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to that. Some of the key concerns that office condominium owners contend with include lack of expansion opportunities, a shared reception, parking access. Some of the key concerns that retail condominium owners contend with include surrounding uses, limitations on retail use, and loading, unloading, and parking requirements. Key considerations for new and resale condominium. You would recommend that the buyer review the site plan, if available, confirm with the developer that all site plan agreements have been complied with, and that no further action will be required by the new board of directors. If a buyer occupies a unit before registration and the turnover to the board of directors, they would be required to enter into an occupancy agreement and pay occupancy fees to the developer. To protect the interests of clients, you must confirm that the zoning bylaws will permit clients' intended use of unit. You will document any pre-occupancy renovations that the buyer and developer agree upon, and would include them as scheduled in the agreement of purchase and sale. Purchasing resale commercial condominiums. Part of the due diligence, any agreement of purchase and sale should be conditional on the buyers receiving an approving of status certificate. Any renovation or modification that the seller or buyer agree upon before occupancy must be documented. Before any modifications are made to a unit, they may impact the common areas. There would need to be a discussion with the board of directors, who would need to approve any renovations. All right, due diligence for a salesperson basically is recognize the complexities associated with various due diligence obligations, including financing and zoning verification obligations, as well as those regarding declaration and bylaws, and how they impact the use and sale of the unit. Key information to gather. During a commercial inspection, you will point out various features that will benefit the client's business, both in the unit itself and as all common elements. When preparing to sell a new condominium, a developer must provide a disclosure statement to the buyer as required by the Condominium Act, detailing, among other things, a budget for the first year of operation following registration. You should also access copies of any covenants and restrictions included in a land development agreement, as well as the declaration, any floor plans, and whatever other information needs to be included in the agreement of purchase and sale. Potential detrimental conditions. Due to significant renovations occurring in the adjoining units, the structural integrity of the subject property may have been compromised. Ideally, a seller would report any concerns to the board of directors or the property management. Yeah, basically that's it. Moving on to module 6. Module 6, let's exit here. There are a total of 15 modules in this course. I'm not sure if we are able to cover everything in one go, but we will try our best. If anything, I'll just make another video. We can take a break in between. Alright, module 6. Sorry, 1 second, I wasn't there. It's a small lesson, so it should be fairly easy to cover. So planning and zoning related matters for industrial properties. Planning and zoning for industrial properties are diverse and include buildable percentage on a lot unique to industrial properties, redevelopment issues, and sensitive land issues. Planning and zoning sensitive land issues are under municipal jurisdiction. However, sensitive land issues must be handled consistently across the province and confirmed with the provincial policy statement. Other market considerations for industrial properties. Market considerations for industrial properties will have a significant impact on both sellers and buyers in the industrial markets. Such factors as interest rates, government policies, demographics, and supply and demand will influence the availability and desirability of suitable properties. The importance of assessing the needs of a seller. So you will need to assess the needs of a seller of an industrial property. Your assessment process will include explaining and identifying range of processes in documents, policies, and tax requirements. Importance of assessing the needs of a buyer. So basically the same thing. Your assessment will involve assessing source of industrial information and determining incentive programs available through a local economic development office in the municipalities. Implications of zoning restrictions related to a buyer's potential concern. Being able to identify the implications of zoning restrictions related to a buyer's potential concerns will be key to site selection process. Elements such as signage, use restrictions, storage, parking, and lot size will play a role in determining if a site is good fit or not. Legal requirements, basically understand the legal and physical requirements of buyers and industrial properties is an important part of the salesperson activities. General understanding of environmental site assessment, brownfields, and various types of industrial buildings features and categories. Basically, you need to know all of that. That was module 6. Moving on to module 7. Like I said, it takes a long time to go from one module to another. It's either that or my computer is just slow. I don't know. Anyways, we're at module 7. Module 7 basically talks about due diligence of and obligations of a salesperson. You should already know this. It's basically conduct a visual inspection, gather key information, redeveloping of industrial property. We can read that. Let's say, before listing an industrial property, discuss the possibility of development of the seller's industrial property. Before listing an industrial property, you should discuss the possibility of the property can be redeveloped. Some things to discuss: if and why a property can be redeveloped rather than sold, highest and best use of the property, if the municipality's office plan and zoning plans will permit development. Basically, yeah. You should also discuss the detrimental conditions, basically easements and restrictions affecting access to all required areas of the property and building, environmental issues resulting in contamination of the property, cost associated with assessment, repair or remediation on the property, potential impact of neighboring areas and adjoining properties. Yeah. Evaluating an industrial property is complex. Unless you're an appraiser, you will not have the knowledge and skill to do conduct evaluation. You must recommend your seller or buyer to an appraiser to get the property value. The appraiser will consider the following factors to complete the appraisal. It's the buildings and surrounding land, environmental issues, impact of zoning designation on a value of property, highest and best use of the property to provide the greatest economic benefits, impact of neighboring properties and general location on the value of the property, impact of economic free zones on the value of the property, and basically, yeah, that's it. Moving on to Module 8. Module 8. We're halfway through module the course. I think I would just finish it, to be honest. Let's exit here. Alright, Module 8 summary. So basically it's just an introduction to commercial properties. You should be aware of how your obligations apply to all buyers. And leading practices for showing. This stuff is all covered in the previous courses. You should, when preparing to show and showing a commercial property, you should be aware to gather relevant information, conduct showing, and follow up in any way that accommodates both sellers and buyers' needs. Yeah, basically, Module 8 is covered in previous courses. I'm not going to read over it again. If you don't know it, I suggest you do go over it so you know you are all caught up. Let's move on to Module 9. Module 9 is completing agreement of purchase and sale for office and retail properties. This is all the same, almost kind of thing, except some parts. So it's almost the same as completing a purchase and sale for a residential, but you do have to do some extensive research for commercial properties because it's a little bit more complex. So I do suggest you go over this. Like residential purchase and sale, there's a notice of fulfillment, a waiver, you have schedules, you have conditions, and all that good stuff. So Module 9 is basically the same thing. We've already covered it in the previous courses, so I am not going to go over it. If you are unsure, please do go over it yourself. Moving on to Module 10. Module 10 is pretty small and it should be fairly easy. Let's see what they talk about here. So in Module 10, basically it's just an introduction to agreement of purchase and sale for commercial condominiums. It's the same thing. We've learned this in in course 2 and 3. It's the same thing. I'm gonna skip this module as well. Module 10 is, we've already covered it. It's almost the same thing. It's basically the same thing in the course 3 and 2. Welcome to completing agreements of purchase and sale for industrial properties. Module 11 is the same thing as well. Like I said, course 3 covered that as well. It's the same thing. It's just that you do have to go over every single details for commercial and industrial properties because they are more complex and there are more details we need to cover in industrial and commercial buildings agreement of purchase and sale. So Module 12, welcoming to preparing office lease and retail industrial properties. Let's go over this. We're on Module 12, by the way. So, okay, there's a lot of things Well, not a lot of things, but you do need to know some of these things. So excuse me. An introduction to commercial leases. Types of commercial leases can be classified into gross, net, and percentage leases. Based on the structure and arrangements of rent payments, certain leases types are more commonly found in a particular type of property. Base rent refers to the minimum rent payable by a tenant, while additional rent represents the proportionate share of operating costs in addition to the base rent. Key considerations when leasing a property. All leases must contain a minimum requirement content and full account of rent terms, including the rights and obligations of the landlord and tenant. Representation during the lease negotiating process provides several benefits to the both landlord and tenant. Common considerations and issues in commercial leases include CAM charges, charges, the ability to customize the space and resolution, and protection measures for any landlord and tenant dispute. The specific key consideration in a lease should reflect the type of commercial property involved. Consideration for office and retail industrial leases. For office leases, LEED certification may attract larger companies' tenants who seek to enhance their corporate image as a safe and socially responsible workplace. Tenants can customize open concept office areas to fit their business needs related to the number of office spaces and reception area. Shared meters are often used in office buildings. Tenants may request a landlord for renovations to improve the building's accessibility in compliance with the Ontario Building Code to attract more employees and customers, with the cost being recovered over the lease term. Parking requirements should be established in the lease to ensure sufficient parking spots for the intended use by the tenant. Any signage related details and restrictions must be specific in the lease in addition to the party responsible for associated costs. For retail leases, tenants typically have control over how they can customize the space to support their business requirements. Some tenants may seek exclusive rights to operate their types of business to protect their sales potential. Shopping complexes and malls generally have features to accommodate customers with accessibility issues, while other properties lacking such features attract fewer tenants. Possible restrictions on the time and location allowed for delivery of stock, as well as any tenant-specific requirements for stock delivery should be set out in the lease. Specific signage location, the party responsible, often the tenant, for related costs and restrictions should be indicated in the lease. Industrial leases can provide for the allocation of space on the premises to non-industrial use to accommodate administrative and other staff, with related details specified by the tenant. Tenants should ensure that the building features such as electrical systems, sprinkler density, clear height, bay size, floor loads, column spaces, and HVAC can accommodate their industrial use. The tenant typically pays the operating costs in an industrial lease, and those who seek a larger industrial operation should ensure that the required utilities are available on the premises and can be upgraded to support their intended use. Requirements for loading docks and delivery areas are often determined by the types of delivery vehicle, the mode of delivery, and or the nature of industrial operation. Environmental impacts of a tenant's operation need to be given full consideration to prevent any harmful consequences to the environment and or surrounding areas, as well as required waste processing facilities or disposal services. Key regulations affecting a commercial lease. Important regulations that govern commercial lease include the Commercial Tenancies Act, Municipal Zoning and Bylaws, Licensing Acts, and the Statute of Frauds. The Short Term of Lease Act and rules and regulation of the Building and Condominium Corporation. Always seek the advice of a third-party professional such as a lawyer or lawyers for guidance on any legal issues. Services provided to a tenant or landlord. It's your obligation. You have the obligation to provide their client with services required to ensure that the client can make informed decisions and obtain lease terms that are fair and beneficial to both parties. Such services include gathering pertinent information conducting due diligence, and preparing negotiating terms for a lease. Brokerages or salespersons can be compensated for their services according to the allowable methods for calculating remuneration as established under RIBA. Due diligence of a salesperson regarding conducting a salesperson's conduct regarding a trade in real estate should comply with requirements establishing in the Code of Ethics and fulfill the responsibilities related to due diligence. Responsibilities of the parties involved. Landlords or property owners have several responsibilities, including providing quiet and safe possession of the leased premises to the tenant and supplying accurate information about the property to the salesperson. Property managers have general responsibilities related to the maintaining of the property in terms of financial, physical, and operational aspects. They play a key role in facilitating communication and good relationship between landlords and tenants. Calculating areas and related linear measurements. The BOMA standards are widely used when measuring a commercial building. Salesperson may be required to measure building areas for verification purposes using various tools, namely measuring tapes and laser measuring devices. Area calculations involves several key aspects, such as the R and U factor, rentable area, and gross leasable area, for all of which are important for calculating base and additional rents. Prepare a comparative market. So a CMA is designed to assist a landlord in comparing their property with other similar properties on the market and the tenant in assessing the pros and cons for rental properties. Factors affecting the advertising and marketing. All advertising activities in real estate must comply with the relevant provision under RIBA. Advertising and marketing of a commercial property involves identifying the target market, showcasing the key features in the property, and selecting appropriate marketing materials and channels. So that was module 12, sorry. And moving on to module 13. We're almost there, guys. Please, just a little bit longer. Just stay with me. Module 13. There you go. So module 13 summary includes documenting lease negotiation. Commercial leases are formal documents that can come after an agreement to lease or letter of intent. An agreement to lease sets out the fundamental material aspect of an agreement between the parties. It details substantive issues and is best described as consensus leading to a final agreement. An agreement to lease includes items such as a description of the premises to be leased, commencement of the lease, term of the lease, the amount of rent. Once an agreement of lease has been accepted, it is binding to the parties. For this agreement of lease, from this agreement to lease, typically lawyers would construct the formal lease document. Salespersons are advised to ensure the agreement of lease is fully complete in all respects, as any confusion can result in legal ramification. Essential components of a commercial agreement to lease. So there is no standard commercial lease document, although every lease is different. There are several things that a commercial agreement to lease should address, including rent and deposit amounts, insurance requirements, obligations of the tenant and landlord for the cost of repairs and maintenance of property. A commercial agreement to lease must indicate terms for the renewal and termination of the lease and the type of tenancies that is being agreed to. Other components of the lease set out the obligations of the tenant and landlord and how disputes about these obligations will be handled. The agreement to lease will include other businesses details that have been negotiated between the landlord and the tenant. Commercial agreement to lease are a complex document. Therefore, it is important to carefully word the language of the lease and to reduce the likelihood of misunderstandings that could jeopardize the agreement. Calculations must be done carefully and thoroughly to assess the rent and additional expenses payable by the tenant. Any restrictions on the use of the property must be clearly stated in the agreement to lease and fully understood by the tenant to make sure they sorry, I lost track. 1 second, hold on. I got distracted by my brother. Sorry. Any restrictions on the use of the property must be clearly stated in the agreement to lease and fully understood by the tenant to make sure that they confirm with the tenant's intended use. Arrangements concerning who is responsible for the cost of repairs and maintenance and who can perform the work and under what circumstances must be documented. Excuse me. When a tenant wants the option to sublease a property, the agreement to sublease must address the various conditions related to sublease, which includes the subtenant and sublandlord identification, term of sublease, renewal rights, and the landlord's condition of approval of the new tenant. Wow. The components of an office, retail, and industrial lease. Various features of each commercial property types arise from differences in the construction techniques, typical use and designs, zoning and planning requirements, and market trends associated with commercial properties. And understanding of the essential components common to all commercial leases is essential to ensure fair and mutually beneficial lease terms and conditions. For office leases, components to consider are signage, hour of operation, security features, parking and visitor parking, common areas, maintenance, and accessibility, to name a few. For retail leases, components to consider are operation hours, restrictive uses dependent on the other business tenants, continuous use, and dark space, fixtures and improvements, and the blanket commercial standards. Industrial leases can be quite involved with not only spacing requirements but also zoning requirements. An industrial client may require environmental testings, transportation access, exterior storage, and special insurances. The following details are captured in the schedules and attached to the commercial lease are signage, parking, site plan, floor plan, and rules and regulation. Additional documentation used when leasing a commercial property. The Ontario Human Rights Code set out permissible practices for landlords requesting tenant credit references and rental history information. With certain restrictions, a landlord may request for credit reference purposes for rental history, income information, and authorization to conduct a credit check. Confidentiality agreements are especially common while negotiating a lease with a prospective tenant is expected to provide financial records to the landlord. A landlord can request information on the prospective tenant's business to confirm the tenant has authority to enter into a lease and the person signing the lease has the authority to do so. Reviewing an agreement to lease. Most commonly work with an working with an agreement to lease rather than the actual lease document. These components of an agreement to lease include parties to the agreement, premise and use, term and rent, services, additional rent and charges, landlords and tenants work, signing requirements. So, complete an agreement to lease. An agreement to lease document the essential elements the parties are agreeing to will form part of the formal lease. The agreement contains specific sections, clauses to capture the requirements of the parties. When a tenant submits the offer and the landlord accepts the offer, signatures and initials must be completed where required on the form. When a prospective tenant or landlord changes anything in the agreement to lease after it has been submitted, all changes must be initialed and the new information inserted in the appropriate place on the form. When the offer is acceptable to the other party, the agreement of lease is signed and witnessed. In some instance, the condition may still need to be processed through an amendment, notice of fulfillment, or a waiver. You will use an amendment when the parties agree to change in the agreement to lease after acceptance. You will use a notice of fulfillment to confirm that one party to the agreement to lease has fulfilled one or more conditions in the agreement. You will use a waiver to waive one party's right to fulfill a condition to the agreement to lease, of the agreement to lease. Pre-closing issues and the role of a salesperson. Issues that may arise when closing a transaction include agreed upon terms in the agreement to lease not fulfilled, change to condition of the property prior to tenant possession, previous tenants not vacating the unit on time and leaving the unit in disrepair. To prevent problems on closing a lease transaction, maintain a checklist of conditional dates and activities, and obtain relevant documents to support tenants' due diligence requirements. If a transaction does not successfully close, as a salesperson, you will need to acquire written consent of both parties and return the deposit if it qualifies for a refund. Wow, that was Module 13. Moving on to Module 14. We're almost done. Please bear with me for a little bit longer as I get to Module 14. All right, Module 14 Summary. Introduction to land development trades. The highest and best use for reevaluating real property is the use that at the time of the appraisal is most likely to produce the greatest net return in money and or amenities to the land over a given period of time. Plottage is a consideration of contributing to the highest and best use. As a salesperson, you should have a good understanding of the types of property, such as raw land or inland or land in natural state, vacant land with services, unoccupied property up to 5 acres, land larger than 5 acres ready for a change in use, farmland, smaller properties available for plottage, and brownfields. Buying and selling development may be risky. Risk refers to uncertainty, change, exposure, and vulnerability imposed on an investor. Some of these risks are financial situations, market situations, business situations, and building situation. For a buyer, a consideration is zoning. A salesperson needs to know if the intended use of the land complies with the zoning bylaw. If it does not, the buyer would need to apply for a zoning amendment, which will delay development. Other issues may impact the buyer's selection of development land. It includes location, environmental conditions, topography, available services, accessibility, title restrictions, easements, and that's it. Moving on, a salesperson due diligence and role professionals and the role of other professionals in land development trades. So basically, salesperson regulatory obligations under the Code of Ethics include the following: for seller clients to take reasonable steps to discover the material facts and disclose them to the seller client at the earliest possible opportunity. For seller customers to disclose material facts that are known or ought to be known by the salesperson. Gather key information about the development land, including information regarding to environmental conditions, available services, topography, and costs associated with adding services vacant land. Act with fairness and honesty and integrity. Provide conscious and competent service. Demonstrate knowledge. Recommend seller or buyer to a third-party professional. Basically, we've covered this in the previous courses. Moving on. Introduction to transactions involving farm properties. A salesperson should have a good understanding of the different types of farm properties to be able to identify key considerations of the buying and selling of a farm property. The key considerations are leasing, quotas, agribusiness, and trend towards fewer farms. Salesperson should know the key factors that may affect a buyer's decision to purchase a farm. Is what is and is not included in the purchase price, easements and right-of-ways, taxes, financing, leases, rented equipment, government and requirements and restrictions, and pesticides. You should also know the key considerations that impact the seller's decision to sell their farm property, whether ownership is under a personal name or corporation name, taxations, liabilities, and implications, namely the seller pays a capital gains tax when they sell an asset that has increased in value, condition of the land after harvest, the presence of an alternative energy source, if applicable, and if the buyer can assume the contract with the energy provider. Salesperson due diligence, basically gather information and verify information, discover and disclose material facts specific to farms, such as improper farm measurements, misrepresented state of soil quality or farm equipment, and undisclosed or excessive use of harmful pesticides. Promoting and protecting the best interest of the client by including specific conditions in the offer, such as verification of soil and water. You should also advise the buyer or seller customer to obtain the services of third-party professional. Obviously, we can't stress that enough. If you don't know anything, make sure you recommend them to a person who is expert in that category. Review an agreement of purchase and sale for a farm property. Basically, a salesperson who are members of organized real estate use forms and clauses provided by OREA. The form of farm properties in OREA Form 500, Agreement of Purchase and Sale Commercial. Regardless of whether a salesperson uses a form, they will need to know the types of information to include in the Agreement of Purchase and Sale unique to farm properties, such as chattels and fixtures, a revocable clause regarding time, and what is included in the total purchase price, and the breakdown of value of each asset. To protect the best interests of buyer, a salesperson should include clauses and conditions appropriate for a buyer and situation, such as making the offer conditional upon the buyer arranging various tests and inspections and receiving reports that are satisfactory to the buyer. That's pretty much it. So complete additional resale related documents. The additional sale related documents are OREA Form 570, Amendment to Agreement of Purchase and Sale. This form is used to change what was previously agreed by the parties in Agreement of Purchase and Sale. OREA Form 574, Notice of Fulfillment of Conditions, Agreement of Purchase and Sale Commercial. This form is used when the party who inserted the condition notifies the other party that they have fulfilled their condition as set out in the Agreement of Purchase and Sale. These forms are frequently used for condition precedent clauses. And then a waiver. This form is used when the party who inserted the condition has not fulfilled their condition as set out in the Agreement of Purchase and Sale, but wants to proceed with the transaction. Pre-closing issues, basically sometimes there's issues regarding missing farm equipment, damaged crops, and fewer livestock. To help ensure the transaction closes successfully, you should recommend an amendment to the agreement that will give both parties sufficient time to resolve this issue. For example, extending the closing date, reimbursing the buyer for the missing of farm equipment, or changing the number of livestock to reflect the reduced number. Leading practices that may help a salesperson address closing challenges include proper farm permits are in place. Buyer obtains an inspection of the well capacities, the septic tank, soil and condition of farm equipment. Buyer has a right insurance on the produce or the animals. Buyer's lawyer and accountant have reviewed the permits and financials respectively. Wow, that was module 14. One more module to go, please. Let's do it. Module 15. Haha. I got my energy back as soon as I got to module 15. I'm like, oh yes, almost done. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's good to go over everything because you don't want to fail the exam and have to retake it and stuff. But yeah, module 15, REBA's impact on the sale and purchase of a business. REBA defines a business as an undertaking carried on for gain or profit, including any interest in any such undertaking, a salesperson registered with RICO may trade in business. A business trade involves the transfer of ownership of the business entity and not the real property, although real property may be a component of the sale. When involved in the trade of a business, a salesperson must comply with RIBA and other applicable legislation that relate to the sale of a business. Specifically, a salesperson must comply with the section of Ontario Regulation 576/05 by ensuring the following information is provided to a buyer before seller and buyer enter into a final agreement of purchase and sale. Sorry. I don't know why I'm thinking. Okay. A profit and loss statement for the business for the preceding 12 months or since the business was acquired by the seller. A statement of the assets and liabilities of the business. A statement containing a list of fixtures and goods, chattels, and other assets. The rights regulating to or connected with the business that are not included in the trade. If financial statements are not available, the seller or the signing authority must deliver an affidavit statement signed under oath to the brokerage. The brokerage will then deliver the statement to the buyer, who will sign it and acknowledge that they have received and read the statement for the seller. Additional additional regulation and legislation impacting the sale of a business. Depending on the business location and the type of business activity, various municipal bylaws, zoning permits, and other rules and regulations that could impact the sale of a business. At the provincial level, the following legislation affects the trading in businesses. The Business Corporations Act regulates the trade names. The Partnerships Act guides the terms of the business partnership agreement. The Employment Standards Act protects the rights of the employees of the business being sold. At the federal level, the following legislation affects trading in business. The income tax regulates capital gains, defines as the gains from the disposition of capital property, a percentage of which must be added to taxable income on disposition of the asset. Providing services to the seller or buyer. Some of the services that you can provide to your seller client include noting specifics about the premises, obtaining and reviewing documents, creating and implementing a marketing plan, scheduling visits to the business for the buyer, recommending that the seller obtains the services of a third-party professional, and obtaining confidentiality agreements from all interested parties. Examples of services provided to the buyer client. Basically, identifying businesses that may interest the buyers and scheduling appointments with the listing and salesperson to review the premises, drafting agreements of purchase and sale, obtaining all necessary documents for the listing salesperson. Understanding financial statements. A seller is required to provide certain financial statements to the buyer. These financial statements are used to assess the financial revenue generated by the business. They include the following: an income statement. The income statement shows the revenue and the expenses of a business and reflect the financial performance of that business over a specific period of time. The information in the statement can be used to advise the seller or buyer on the best indicated value of the business. A balance sheet. A balance sheet reflects all the assets and liabilities and shows the financial position of a business at a specific point in time. The balance sheet is used to determine the owner's equity in the business. Audited and unaudited statements prepared by the accountant. Audited and unaudited statements shows the financial status of the business. Key considerations when selling a business. The two main types of business sales are asset sale and share sale. Key aspects of an asset sale include the buyer does not assume any existing liabilities such as debt. The buyer is eligible for tax deductions and benefits by claiming capital cost allowance on depreciable property. Key aspects of a share sale include the buyer essentially replaces the seller as the owner of the shares of corporation. The buyer assumes that all assets and accepts all liabilities. The seller benefits from a tax standpoint, since any gain to the seller or on a sale of share will be considered under the capital gain tax exemption. Key considerations a salesperson need to keep in mind when handling the sale of a business include operating licenses, trade unions and unionized employees, distribution rights agreements and intellectual property use agreement, retention of key employees, seller financing. Valuing a business. So a business valuation typically focuses on gross income, but more refined measures may be used depending on the business type and size. Some methods for valuing a business include direct capitalization, gross income multiplier, discounted cash flow, adjusted book value, and asset valuation. Factors including influencing Factors influencing selection of valuation method include business type and size, personal perspective, historical cash flow performances, true financial statements, present circumstances, comparables, inventory, equipment and other fixtures, leasehold improvements, and potential value of a remainder of current lease. Basic rules when deciding a valuation method for a business include identifying the components of the business being sold and establishing an effective date of the valuation. Determining if the market value or other type of value is required. Gather all pertinent documentation related to identified components, providing an estimate only after careful evaluation of all facts. And then you have third-party professionals that are experts who can provide insight and guidance to the seller or buyer in situations where a salesperson does not have the knowledge or skill or expertise. Their advice can help avoid business risks arising out in incomplete or unclear information. So that was module 15. Moving 1 second, we still have some left. Okay. What is a turnkey and franchise business? A turnkey business includes everything a new owner needs to start running the business. A common turnkey business is a franchise. A franchise is a style of business entrepreneurship under which a franchisor, for a fee or other remuneration, grants to the franchisee the right to sell goods or services perfected by the franchisor using the franchisor's name, logo, and methods of expertise. Business franchises generally fall into three categories: retail business and personal services and travel and leisure. When buying a franchise, the buyer is agreeing to abide by the terms of the franchise agreement, including conditions that may affect or possibly nullify the sale. Considerations that a buyer must keep in mind when purchasing a franchise business include a franchisor provides a complete format to assist with the start-on and ongoing operation. However, the franchise must meet franchisor standard and follow often stringent operating procedures. The rapid growth of a franchisor increases the likelihood of the success of a franchisee. However, if a franchisor's head office is located in another country, the redress may be difficult if the franchisor fails to live up to promises and obligations. A franchisor typically has an established image in the marketplace that provides the franchisee with a brand name identification to attract consumers. However, franchises involving the sale of products normally require that all products acquired from the franchisor or an authorized franchisor supplier. The initial cost for established franchisee operation can be high and fees for ongoing operations can add up to a significant amount. Preparing to sell a business. When preparing to sell a business, a salesperson has a certain responsibility, such as reviewing the financial documents of the business, advising the seller to consult a third-party professional, asking the seller specific questions to gather information about the business. Pre-closing for a business trade. Issues may arise that may disrupt or delay successful closing of a transaction. These issues may include concerns regarding ownership of major assets and the business entity. Lender's issues regarding a change in the buyer's profile and the business profile. Unforeseen circumstances affecting the insurance rates. Missing schedules or fixtures. Assumption approval for franchise agreements and leases being changed or withdrawn completely. Agreed upon terms in the term of agreement not being fulfilled by the relevant party. Changes to the material component of the business. What can a salesperson do to prevent these issues? They should provide a due diligence investigation in the agreement of purchase and sale, include clauses in the agreement of purchase and sale for the seller to operate the business in a responsible manner until closing. Include a clause in the agreement of purchase and sale requiring updated documentation on the day of closing. Follow up on the status of all documentation to ensure requirements are met within the designated time frames. And then obviously assist the lawyers by retrieving or delivering required documents. Wow, that was module 15. So I just went over the whole course 4. There are some things that we do need to go over in detail, but I'll probably make another video. Hope this helped. Thank you so much for listening through and sitting with me for the whole, I don't know how long it took to do this, but thank you so much. I hope this helped, and